After nearly 7 years of marriage, I thought I had weathered every possible storm of bitterness and heartache, but I was wrong. The greatest pain, the ultimate humiliation, would come from the very man I had loved and trusted for all those years. Just beyond my own bedroom door, I stood frozen, listening to the whispered voice of my husband, Michael. "What are you so scared of? My wife is so blindly in love with me, she trusts every word I say. Just be patient. Once I get control of her company, I'll divorce her and bring you and our son home for good." And the woman he was speaking to, the woman from my most horrific nightmares, was none other than Jessica, my sister-in-law, whom I had taken under my wing and cared for with all my heart. My world shattered in an instant on the very night I believed would be our happiest, our 7th wedding anniversary. My business trip to Tokyo had ended 3 days ahead of schedule. Throughout the long flight home, I could barely contain my excitement. I hadn't told Michael, wanting to give him the biggest surprise. I had bought him the limited edition watch he'd been dreaming of, imagining the joyous look on his face as he pulled me into his arms. I pictured a warm, intimate anniversary dinner where we would reminisce about the sweet memories of the past 7 years. I believed that after all this time, our love was a fortress, unshakable and indestructible. I arrived home just as the clock neared 11 p.m. Our large suburban house was shrouded in silence. I gently turned the key in the lock, trying not to make a sound. The house was warm, a faint scent of orchids lingering in the air. Everything was neat and tidy. I set my suitcase down and tiptoed up to the 2nd floor, towards our master bedroom. My heart hammered against my ribs. 7 days apart felt like an eternity, and I missed him terribly. But just a few steps from the door, a strange object hanging casually from the brass handle made me stop dead. It was a black lace bra, a style so daring and provocative it could never be mine. A cold shock coursed through my body. 1,000 chaotic questions swirled in my mind. Whose is this? Why is it here? The blood in my veins felt like it was flowing in reverse, my throat turning to dust. I pressed my ear against the wooden door, holding my breath to listen. And then I heard its sounds I should never have heard. Whispers and soft giggles, punctuated by heavy, ragged breaths. A woman's intuition screamed a horrifying truth, but my rational mind fought to deny it. Trembling, I gently pushed the door, widening the small crack. Through the hazy gap, under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, a naked, sordid scene assaulted my eyes. There, on our marital bed, were my husband and my sister-in-law, tangled in each other's arms. I stood there, a soulless statue. Every emotion inside me crumbled to dust, leaving only a numbing pain and an all-consuming disgust. I had been betrayed by the 2 people I trusted most in the world. My first instinct was to storm in, to scream and unleash my fury. But then I heard Michael's voice, thick with passion. "You're addictive, Jessica." As if that dagger wasn't deep enough, I heard their conversation continue the whispers they thought no one in the world could ever hear. "I'm scared Emily will find out," Jessica said, a hint of worry in her voice. And that's when my husband uttered the words that murdered my soul, the words that laid bare his entire disgusting conspiracy. "What are you so scared of? My wife is so blindly in love with me, she trusts every word I say. Just be patient. Once I get control of her company, I'll divorce her and bring you and our son home for good." Her company. Bring you and our son home. So, it wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plot to steal everything from me. And there was a child. As the dizzy spell passed, the excruciating pain morphed into a terrifying coldness. Almost by reflex, my trembling hand pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers were so cold and shaky it took me 2 tries to open the camera app. I switched to video mode, raised the phone, and aimed it directly at the crack in the door. The screen clearly captured the filthy scene, recording every bit of evidence of their lies, their cruelty, their despicable scheme. I don't know how long I stood there recording, only that when I finally lowered the phone, tears were streaming down my face. But my eyes no longer held weakness. They held a burning fire of hatred. They may have started this play, but I would be the one to write its ending. The truth had broken me, but in that moment of devastation, I knew exactly what I had to do. How would my journey for justice unfold? Would I be strong enough to fight the conspiracy of my husband and his family? I don't know how long I stood motionless in the hallway. It could have been a minute or 10. Time seemed to stop, filled only by the ringing in my ears and the sordid images replaying in my mind. I stumbled backward, my legs as soft as jelly. I was terrified that the slightest noise would cause the door to fly open, forcing me to face them. I choked back a sob that was rising in my throat, turned, and walked numbly down the stairs. I collapsed onto the sofa in the pitch-black living room, the phone still warm in my palm. My whole body shook uncontrollably, not from the cold, but from a pain that was tearing my soul into 1,000 pieces. With some kind of morbid courage, I replayed the video. The screen lit up, the sound and images once again exposing the naked truth. I could hear my own shaky breathing, captured by the microphone. I saw my husband, the man I proudly showed off to my friends, whispering words of love into another woman's ear. I saw my sister-in-law, whom I had treated like my own flesh and blood, responding with flirtatious, inviting gestures, all of it happening on my bed, in the very house I had built. I watched that video over and over, I don't know how many times. Each viewing was another slice of a knife through my heart. I tortured myself, forcing my eyes open to the reality so that no illusions could remain. The tears flowed, hot and bitter. Sweet memories of the past 7 years flooded back like a slow-motion film, a cruel contrast to the harsh present. I remembered the day I first met Michael. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, his smile as bright as the sun, his gentle eyes holding a universe of stars. I remembered our first date at the beach, where he held my hand and said, "Emily, I can't promise you the wealthiest life, but I promise I'll always be the strongest shoulder for you to lean on." I remembered the night he got down on one knee under the candlelight. He had said, "Be my wife. I vow to love and protect only you for the rest of my life." I had believed him. I believed in those promises, in a love I thought was my destiny. I had turned down so many more successful men to choose him, a regular sales manager, because I believed in his sincerity. Then, more recent memories surfaced, tearing those beautiful images to shreds. I began to piece together all the unusual signs I had foolishly ignored. The nights Michael came home late, blaming important client dinners. The phone calls he'd rush to take on the balcony, his voice a secretive whisper. The times he'd flinch if I accidentally touched his phone. And Jessica, I remembered the times she would accidentally walk around the house in flimsy nightgowns, the times she'd coyly ask Michael to help fix a light bulb or carry something heavy, the seemingly unintentional touches, the glances they shared when they thought I wasn't looking. All of those puzzle pieces now formed a crystal-clear picture, exposing a sinful relationship that had been unfolding right under my nose. But what pained and disgusted me most wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was their scheme. Once I get control of her company, I'll divorce her and bring you and our son home for good. My love, my trust, our 7 years of marriage, it was all just part of his plan to seize my assets. He didn't just want my body, he wanted my career, the sweat and tears I had poured into building my success. He saw me as a fool, a fattened lamb to be slowly led to the slaughter. And Jessica wasn't just the other woman. She was an accomplice, a willing participant in his vile plot. The pain in my chest reached its peak. I buried my face in my knees, the sobs I had been suppressing finally breaking free in choked, ragged gasps. What did I do wrong? I had devoted myself to this family. I treated Jessica better than my own sister, looking after her every need. I sacrificed my own time and hobbies to be a good wife and a good sister-in-law. And in return, I got a knife plunged into my back, a knife held by the two people I loved most. I cried until my tears ran dry and my throat was raw. I lifted my head and stared into the darkness enveloping the room. The weakness and despair began to subside, replaced by a different feeling, something cold and sharp. It was hatred. An absolute, profound hatred. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. If I crumbled, I would be handing them everything they wanted on a silver platter. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I wiped my tears, taking a deep breath to steady myself. My hands were no longer shaking. I opened my phone again and saved the video to a secure, hidden folder. This would be my weapon. I wouldn't cause a scene, wouldn't engage in a foolish, screaming match. My mother had always taught me that to deal with a venomous snake, you must use a cold mind. They wanted to act in a play? Fine, I would act with them. I would play the part of the naive, blindly loving wife until the very end. I would let them gloat, let them get careless, and let them expose all their dirtiest secrets themselves. And when the final curtain fell, the ones paying the price would not be me. I stared into the darkness, trying to recall the image of that poor, pitiful sister-in-law. The grieving widow, so fragile, always expressing her gratitude, always needing protection. And then a series of seemingly harmless memories flooded back, weaving together to paint a completely different face, a face I had never suspected. The darkness in the living room felt thick, the only light an eerie glow from my phone screen on my tear-streaked face. The wave of hatred passed, leaving a terrifying emptiness in its wake. My thoughts were no longer on Michael. At this moment, the image that haunted and disgusted me most was Jessica's, the sister-in-law I had welcomed with open arms, the woman upon whom I had showered all my sympathy and kindness. It turned out the most venomous snake was the one I had brought into my own home, warming it in my own embrace. I remembered it vividly the day David, Michael's older brother, died in a horrific car crash 5 years ago. It was a massive shock to the entire family, but the one who fell apart the most was Jessica. She had only been married for a little over a year, and they didn't have any children yet. At the funeral, she cried until she fainted. She became gaunt and frail, her eyes perpetually swollen and vacant. Looking at her then, no one could hold back their tears. As her sister-in-law, I was by her side through those difficult days. I held her, comforted her, and made sure she ate and slept. I felt so sorry for her, a young woman who had suddenly lost her anchor in life. After David's death, Jessica lived alone in their old house, a lonely figure coming and going. My mother-in-law, Carol, felt for her, but she had her own life and couldn't be with her all the time. It was I who suggested to Michael, "Why don't we ask Jessica to come live with us? Our house is big enough, it would be nice to have her around. I worry about her being all alone. What if something happened? Besides, with her here, we could take turns looking after Mom." Michael was deeply moved. He hugged me and said, "I'm so lucky to have such a kind-hearted wife." I just smiled, happy that I had done something good to bring the family closer. And so, Jessica moved in. I treated her without any formality, like my own sister. I knew her office salary wasn't high, so I covered all the household expenses, never letting her contribute a single dollar. I worried she might feel insecure, so whenever I went shopping, I would buy her the same expensive clothes and handbags as my own, telling her we could look beautiful wearing matching things. I even arranged for her to join my company's corporate retreats, introducing her to everyone as my sister, and I was proud of it. I even constantly reminded Michael to be more attentive to her, to be a good younger brother in his late brother's place. I was so foolish that I had personally created every opportunity, pushing my own husband into that woman's arms. Now, looking back at it all through the lens of this cruel reality, Jessica's seemingly innocent actions and words came back to me, sharp as shards of glass. I remembered one time she let it slip to my mother-in-law, "Carol, you should have seen the new handbag Emily bought yesterday. I heard it cost tens of thousands of dollars. She's really amazing, so good at making money and enjoying life." At the time, my mother-in-law shot me a disapproving look, and I just laughed it off, thinking Jessica was just being naive. But now I understood. It was a spiteful, calculated remark, meant to paint me in my mother-in-law's eyes as a wasteful, extravagant daughter-in-law. I remembered the times I'd come home late from work to find Jessica busy in the kitchen. She'd see me and say quickly, "Oh, you're home. I saw you were busy, so I started dinner for you. I hope you don't mind." Back then, I was touched, feeling lucky to have such a good sister-in-law. But now I realize it was her way of slowly replacing me in the kitchen and in my husband's eyes. She was building an image of a diligent, hard-working woman, a stark contrast to me, the career-obsessed wife, and the brazenly intimate gestures. Once, I came home unexpectedly and found Jessica giving Michael a shoulder massage in the living room. Seeing me, she showed no embarrassment at all, just smiled and said, "Michael was so tired from work, I was just helping him relax a bit." Michael chimed in, "Yeah, honey, Jessica's got great hands. You should learn from her." At the time, I just felt a little uncomfortable, but then chided myself for being petty and jealous. But now I knew it wasn't jealousy. It was intuition, a warning bell I had willfully ignored. That woman, with her facade of weakness and sorrow, had used my own empathy and kindness as her weapon. She had turned my home into her stage, performing a perfect play of sisterly love, while secretly seducing my husband and plotting to steal everything that was mine. The pain of this betrayal was magnified 100-fold when I realized I had been duped by such a talented actress. I hadn't just lost my husband, I had lost my faith in kindness, in family. The hatred in me rose to a fever pitch, but I knew hatred alone wasn't enough. I needed to act. The recording confirmed their plan to take over my company. But what about the detail? Bring you and our son home. Was the child real, or just a lie to keep Jessica hooked? If he was real, how old was he, and why had I never known a thing? A new tangle of questions emerged, pushing me to find answers. I couldn't act with only half the truth. I needed to know everything, and perhaps the answers were right there, in Jessica's phone, the one she so often left carelessly on the kitchen counter when she was helping me cook. The night outside seemed endless. I sat motionless in the darkness of the living room, feeling as if I too were sinking into that black void. But no, I wouldn't allow myself to sink. The fire of hatred and the will to expose everything kept me awake. I couldn't just sit here, wallowing in pain and speculation. I needed proof, more information. Their scheme was bigger than I had imagined, and to confront them, I couldn't act blindly. I stood up silently, my steps as light as a cat's, as I moved toward the kitchen. I didn't turn on any lights, relying only on the faint moonlight filtering through the window. Jessica's beige leather handbag was still sitting nonchalantly on the dining table, right where she'd tossed it after helping me clear the dinner table before disappearing upstairs with Michael. My heart pounded in my chest. This was a risky move. If I got caught, my entire plan would be ruined. But the urge to know the truth was stronger than anything. I carefully unzipped the handbag, trying not to make a sound. Inside, besides a wallet and some makeup, her phone was tucked into a small pocket. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The screen lit up when I pressed the power button. Luckily, she didn't use facial recognition, just a simple pattern lock. Holding my breath, I tried a few common shapes, a Z, an M, nothing. Suddenly, I remembered seeing her unlock it once. Her finger had moved quickly, but it seemed to trace the shape of a heart. I tried drawing a heart. The screen unlocked. A feeling of grim satisfaction mixed with contempt washed over me. Even her password was a cheap declaration of love. I didn't have much time. I skipped the text messages, knowing they'd be careful to delete any evidence. I went straight to the photo gallery. Hundreds of pictures appeared, mostly selfies of Jessica and photos of her with friends. But when I scrolled down to the hidden albums, my heart once again stopped beating. One album was titled, Our Little Family. I tapped on it, and another world, their other life, unfolded before my eyes. There were dozens of photos of Michael and Jessica together, not just casual family pictures, but photos of a real couple. They were hugging on a beach, kissing under the Eiffel Tower during a trip Michael had told me was a business conference in Europe. They were blowing out candles together at a cozy birthday party. But what left me utterly paralyzed were the photos at the end of the album. Jessica, pregnant, her belly round and prominent, her face glowing with happiness. Michael stood beside her, one arm around her, the other hand on her stomach, his eyes filled with adoration and anticipation. And then, the final photo. A chubby, beautiful baby boy wrapped in a light blue blanket. Jessica was holding the baby, while Michael leaned down to kiss his forehead. Beneath the photo was a caption, "Welcome to the world, our son." Jacob, 2 years old. 2 years old. They had a 2-year-old son together. That child was probably born right after Michael's business trip to Europe. For 2 years, he had another family, a son I knew nothing about. He came home every day, playing the role of a loving husband, while his heart and his responsibilities were somewhere else. This deception was too elaborate, too cruel. I felt like I couldn't breathe, my strength completely drained. I sank to the cold kitchen floor, tears once again streaming down my face. So, the pregnancy they mentioned wasn't happening now, it had already happened. Bring you and our son home wasn't a future plan. It was a reality that had existed for 2 years. I scrambled for my own phone and began taking pictures of every incriminating photo, one by one. Each one was proof of their betrayal, their systematic deception. Once I was sure I had saved everything, I carefully covered my tracks on Jessica's phone, placing it back exactly where I found it in her purse. I couldn't stay in this house a second longer. This place was too tainted, too filthy. I quietly returned to the living room, grabbed my coat and handbag. I left my suitcase, not wanting to arouse suspicion. I was leaving, and I would not be coming back as a wife. I stepped out the front door, taking a deep breath of the cold night air. I called a taxi, giving the address of a hotel near my office. In my mind, a plan was beginning to form more clearly. I wasn't running away. I would face them. But I needed time, and a safe place to prepare for the war to come. In the cab, I dialed Michael's number. It rang a few times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello? Emily, honey, where are you?" That same sweet, fake voice. I forced my own voice to sound calm, even a little pouty. "I'm so sorry to wake you. My boss just called with an emergency at the office. I have to go check on it right away. I probably won't be back until morning. You go back to sleep, okay?" "An emergency? What happened? Do you need me to come over?" he asked, feigning concern. "No, don't worry about it. It's nothing major. I can handle it. Just stay home with Jessica, okay? Don't leave her all alone." I deliberately emphasized her name. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then he replied, his voice slightly unnatural. "Okay. You be careful then." After hanging up, I smirked bitterly. He hadn't noticed anything unusual in my words. He was still drowning in his own self-satisfaction, in his perfect charade. But there was one thing he didn't know. The sole audience member for his play now knew everything, and I was getting ready to rewrite the script. A script in which the villain would pay a very, very steep price. As I was lost in my thoughts, my phone vibrated. A new text from an unknown number. The message was short, just one line. "Emily, I know you know everything. Don't act alone. You're in danger." The short text message on my phone screen struck me like a bolt of lightning, shattering my already chaotic thoughts. "Emily, I know you know everything. Don't act alone. You're in danger." My entire body went rigid. Who was this? How did they know I had discovered the truth? And danger? What danger was waiting for me? A barrage of questions hit me, filling me with a fresh wave of panic. The taxi sped through the night, but I felt as if I were being watched by a pair of invisible eyes. A profound sense of unease enveloped me. I quickly texted back, "Who is this?" But there was no reply. I checked into the hotel in a daze. The room was luxurious and warm, but it couldn't dispel the chill that had settled deep in my soul. I bolted the door, drew the curtains, and sat on the edge of the bed, my eyes glued to my phone, waiting. But no more messages came. The terrifying silence was more unsettling than any threat. I realized I couldn't think clearly right now. In the midst of this tempest, I had only one lighthouse, one safe harbor. I dialed my mother's number. It was nearly 2 a.m., but she answered almost immediately, as if she had been awake, waiting for me. "Emily? Honey, what's wrong?" Her calm, warm voice on the other end instantly pulled me back from the brink of hysteria. "Mom!" I burst into tears, my voice choked with sobs. All the strength and composure I had tried to maintain dissolved in the face of my mother's gentleness. I told her everything about the photos I found on Jessica's phone, about the 2-year-old son named Jacob, about my deceptive phone call to Michael, and about the mysterious text message I had just received. My mother listened in silence, not interrupting once. She let me pour out my heart, letting me release all the pain and fear. When I had finally stopped crying, only soft sniffles remaining, she spoke slowly. Her voice held no panic. On the contrary, it was unnervingly calm. "I understand now. Emily, my daughter, you did very well. You were very brave." Her praise surprised me. "But I'm so scared, Mom. I don't know what to do." "It's right to be scared, But don't let fear blind you, my mother said, her tone becoming serious. Listen to me. This is no longer a simple case of infidelity. This is a conspiracy that was planned long before you and Michael even got married. What do you mean? I stammered. Think about it, my mother said, articulating each word clearly. Michael and that woman have had a child for 2 years. Why didn't they make it public? Why are they still acting out this play? If it were just about love, they could have divorced you long ago. But they didn't. Why? Her analysis was like a beam of light cutting through the fog in my mind. That's right. Why? Because their goal isn't love, my mother stated firmly. Their goal is your company, your entire fortune. That girl, Jessica, her husband, died young, leaving her with no support. And Michael is his sales manager, salary enough to give her and their son a life of luxury? Absolutely not. They need money, and you, my dear, are their gold mine. I was beginning to understand. So when he said, once I get control of her company, that was their ultimate goal. Exactly, my mother finished my thought. They're waiting for a moment when your guard is down, when you trust Michael enough to hand everything over to him, and then they'll strike. Think about it. If you hadn't come home early tonight, if you had remained the blindly loving wife, what would have happened in a few years? I shuddered at the thought. I would have likely been tricked into signing some transfer documents and then thrown out of my own house with nothing. What about the text message? Who could that be? I asked worriedly. My mother was silent for a moment, then sighed. I can't be sure. There are 2 possibilities. One, it's another enemy of your husband's family. They live such unscrupulous lives, it wouldn't be surprising if they made enemies. This person might want to use you to get revenge. 2, her voice dropped. It could be one of my people. Your people? I was astonished. Yes, Emily, my mother confessed. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but from the day you decided to marry Michael, I felt something was wrong. A mother's intuition told me that boy wasn't as simple as he seemed. I quietly had someone keep an eye on them from a distance, not to interfere in your life, but to protect you. I was speechless. So, my mother had known, or at least suspected, for a very long time. She had always been there in the background, silently watching over me without my knowledge. So, my plan now. Your plan is good, but it's not enough, my mother interrupted. Pretending you know nothing is a smart move. It will make them careless, but you can't just be on the defensive. You have to attack. You must set a bigger trap. One they will walk into themselves with no way out. A trap? But how? I asked, completely lost. Calm down, my mother said. Tomorrow morning, go home as if nothing happened. Act as if you've finished your work at the office and just returned. Be the innocent wife, without a shred of suspicion. Leave the rest to me. I will tell you what to do at the right time. For now, get some sleep. You'll need your strength to perform the role of a lifetime. The conversation with my mother was like a sedative, helping me regain my composure and sense of direction. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Behind me stood my mother, a wise and powerful woman. She wasn't just my emotional support, she was a brilliant strategist. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to drift off. My play had a new director, and I was confident that under my mother's guidance, it would have a spectacular finale. But I never could have imagined that as soon as I returned home the next morning, my performance would face its first challenge, a challenge from the very woman I called my mother-in-law. The next morning, I woke to the sun streaming through the hotel window. It had been a long night, but after talking to my mother, I had managed a few hours of sleep. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were still puffy, and my face was pale from exhaustion, but the panic from the night before was gone. In its place was a chilling calm. I put on light makeup, just enough to hide my fatigue, and chose an elegant, cream-colored business dress. I had to go back. I had to face them, and I had to play the part of an oblivious wife to perfection. I checked out of the hotel, hailed a cab, and returned to the house. As the car pulled up to the gate, I took a deep breath. The house looked the same, grand and serene, but to me, it was now nothing more than a gilded cage, inhabited by predators waiting to pounce. I walked inside. The house was unusually quiet. Michael and Jessica had likely gone to work. Only my mother-in-law, Carol, was sitting on the sofa, watching TV. Hearing the door, she turned. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, a sharp, probing gaze. "So, you're back," she said, her tone flat. "Yes, hello, Carol. There was an urgent matter at the office, so I had to stay and resolve it." "I just got back," I said politely, bowing my head slightly as I put my handbag down, playing the part of a daughter-in-law tired from work. "Your company seems to be doing well these days," she remarked, her eyes still fixed on the television. "Everything seems to require the CEO's personal attention." The words sounded like a compliment, but I knew the sarcastic barb hidden beneath. She was implying that I cared only for my work and neglected my family. "We've just been lucky, Carol," I replied humbly. "Well, I'm going to go upstairs to change, then I'll come down and tidy up." I quickly headed for the stairs, not wanting to face her any longer. Her gaze made me feel as if she could see right through me. The bedroom was exactly as I had left it. Everything was suspiciously neat. The black lace bra was gone. All traces of the previous night's tryst had been meticulously cleaned, leaving nothing behind. They were so careful. But they didn't know the evidence wasn't at the scene of the crime. It was on my phone. I changed into comfortable clothes and started cleaning. I mopped the floors, did the laundry, and started cooking. I did everything diligently and quietly, just like the devoted wife and daughter-in-law I had been for the past 7 years. I had to make them believe I suspected nothing. The more normal I acted, the more careless they would become. Around noon, Michael and Jessica returned together. Seeing me at home, they both looked a little surprised. "Oh, you're back," Michael said, moving to hug me, but I subtly stepped away, pretending to be busy wiping the table. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming home?" "I wanted to surprise you," I said, looking up with the brightest smile I could muster. It took every ounce of my strength to produce it. "Look, I even made your favorite steak." Michael's eyes showed a flicker of confusion, but he quickly masked it with a strained smile. "You're the best, honey." Jessica, standing behind him, also smiled at me. "You're back. I was so worried when you didn't come home last night." Her smile, her eyes, everything was perfect, flawless. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I too would have been fooled by her pretense. Lunch was a bizarre affair. On the surface, we were a happy family. Carol occasionally put food on my plate. Michael kept complimenting my cooking. Jessica chattered on about funny stories from her office. They were incredible actors, and my performance was no less convincing. I smiled, made small talk, asked about my husband's work, and showed concern for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's health. It was a perfect play, but under the table, my hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. It took all my willpower not to throw my plate at their deceitful faces. After the meal, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Carol came in. She said nothing at first, just stood there with her arms crossed, watching me. After a moment, she asked casually, "So, Emily, how has Michael been lately?" I flinched but maintained my composure. "He's been fine, Carol. Is something wrong?" "I've noticed he's been leaving early and coming home late. He seems exhausted," she sighed. "Work must be stressful. As his wife, you need to pay more attention to him. Take better care of him. Don't be so absorbed in your own work." I stopped washing and turned to look at her. "Don't worry, Carol. I always take care of him." "Take care of him? And he's losing weight?" Her voice rose. "Or maybe you just don't know how to cook him nutritious meals?" A woman, no matter how successful her career is a failure if she can't keep her husband. Her every word was like a needle pricking my skin. She wasn't just being sarcastic, she was testing me. She wanted to see if I had any suspicions about Michael. I took a breath and smiled gently. "You're right, Carol. I must have my shortcomings. I'll make him some chicken soup with herbs tonight to help him regain his strength." My submissive and obedient response seemed to satisfy her. She grunted and turned to leave. I stood silently at the sink, watching her retreat. The first silent confrontation was over. I had passed, but I knew this was just the beginning. This woman, my mother-in-law, was not simple. She was sharper and more suspicious than I had thought. My act would face many more challenges. Just then, I heard Jessica talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice was a whisper, but a few words reached my ears and made me freeze. "That's right, tomorrow afternoon. Wellington Women's Hospital. The results." The hospital? Results? What results? Could she really be pregnant, just as I had heard Michael say in the recording? The words I overheard from Jessica's phone call tomorrow afternoon, Wellington Women's Hospital, the results repeated in my head like an alarm bell. My chest tightened. So, it was true. The pregnancy wasn't just empty words, it was real. And tomorrow, she was going to the hospital to get the results. What results? A confirmation of pregnancy? Or something even more significant? I quickly turned off the faucet, straining to hear more, but Jessica had already hung up as she saw Michael coming downstairs. For the rest of the afternoon, I was in a daze. I tried to act normal, but my mind was spinning with speculation. If Jessica was truly pregnant, that would be their trump card, an extremely dangerous one. What would they use the baby for? To force me into a seemingly justifiable divorce? Or to bind Michael to her, forcing him to act faster to seize my company? That child would become the heir of the family, something my mother-in-law, Carol, had always dreamed of. She would stop at nothing to protect it and to legitimize its existence. I couldn't just sit back and wait. I had to know exactly what was happening. I had to be at that hospital tomorrow afternoon. But how could I go without raising suspicion? Michael and Carol were watching me like hawks. Any unusual move could put them on high alert. An idea sparked in my mind. I needed an excuse, a perfect excuse. That evening at dinner, I intentionally ate very little, my face feigning exhaustion and pallor. Every so often, I would press a hand to my stomach and grimace, as if enduring a dull ache. Michael noticed and asked, his voice dripping with fake concern, "What's wrong, Emily? You look pale." "I'm fine," I replied weakly. "It's probably just stress from work. I haven't been eating properly, so my stomach is a little upset." My mother-in-law, sitting opposite me, glanced over, her eyes suspicious. "If it hurts, you should see a doctor. Don't let it turn into something serious." This was the opening I was waiting for. I looked up at her, my expression hesitant. Yes, I was thinking I might have to take tomorrow afternoon off to get it checked out. I already made an appointment for a general checkup at Wellington Women's Hospital. Wellington Women's Hospital was the largest and most reputable maternity hospital in the city, the very place I suspected Jessica would go. I deliberately mentioned the name to gauge their reactions. Sure enough, upon hearing the name Wellington, I saw Jessica's hand, which was reaching for food, freeze for a split second. Michael's face paled, and he quickly cleared his throat to cover his unease. Only my mother-in-law remained composed. She nodded. "Good. Go get it checked. If you need, have Michael take you." "Oh no, that's not necessary, Carol. I can go by myself. It's just a routine checkup, nothing serious," I quickly refused. I couldn't have Michael with me. My plan required me to act alone. Dinner ended. I had successfully created the perfect alibi. Now, all I had to do was wait for tomorrow afternoon. The next morning, I went to work as usual. But instead of focusing on my tasks, I kept glancing at the clock, my stomach in knots. Around noon, Jessica told Carol she had a lunch date with an old friend and might be back late. My mother-in-law nodded without a hint of suspicion. I knew that old friend was Wellington Women's Hospital. Early in the afternoon, I also left the office, citing my doctor's appointment. I didn't go directly to the hospital. Instead, I drove to a cafe across the street, choosing a table with a clear view of the main entrance. I sat there, waiting patiently. A little after 2 p.m., a taxi pulled up. Jessica got out, wearing a loose-fitting dress, a hat, and a face mask that concealed most of her face. She hurried inside. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited about 10 more minutes before following her in. The hospital was busy. I walked around the lobby, searching for her. I spotted her in the waiting area of the obstetrics department, holding a patient file. She kept looking at her watch, looking anxious. I didn't get close, instead hiding behind a large pillar to observe. A short while later, her name was called. The examination room door closed behind her, leaving me to wait outside. Time crawled by, each minute feeling like an eternity. A million questions raced through my mind. What was she in there for? A routine prenatal checkup? or to receive some kind of important result? Nearly 30 minutes later, the door opened. Jessica emerged, followed by an older female doctor. Jessica's expression was strange, not happy, not sad, but completely blank and dazed. She was holding a piece of paper, likely a test result. The doctor patted her shoulder gently and said something consoling. Jessica just nodded numbly and walked towards the elevator. I quickly followed, keeping a safe distance. I saw that she didn't press the button for the ground floor to leave. She pressed the button for the rooftop. The hospital rooftop? What was she doing up there? A terrible premonition washed over me. I rushed into another elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator doors opened, and a strong gust of wind hit my face. The rooftop was deserted, the only sound the wind whistling in my ears. I saw Jessica standing at the edge of the railing, staring down into the dizzying void below. The paper in her hand fluttered wildly in the wind. What was she planning to do? Could the results have been so devastating that she was considering the unthinkable? The wind on the hospital rooftop howled in fierce gusts, whipping my hair across my face. The scene before me sent a chill down my spine. Jessica was standing precariously at the very edge of the railing. One more step, and she would plummet into the empty space below. The test result in her hand fluttered like a fragile white butterfly, threatening to be snatched away by the wind at any moment. My heart stopped. As much as I hated her to the very core of my being, I couldn't stand by and watch a life end like this. "Jessica!" I yelled, my voice struggling to carry over the wind. Hearing my call, Jessica flinched and spun around. When she saw me, she froze, her eyes wide with panic and fear. "Emily? Why are you here?" Her voice was a trembling whisper, lost in the wind. "Get back here right now! It's dangerous!" I said, slowly approaching her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Stay away!" she shrieked, taking a step back, moving even closer to the edge. "Go away! Just leave me alone!" She clutched her head, her whole body shaking violently. "Why? Why did it have to turn out like this? What happened? What's on that paper?" I tried to keep her talking, to buy time. "Tell me, maybe I can help." "Help?" Jessica let out a crazed laugh, a sound more mournful than any cry. "No one can help me now. It's over. Everything is over." She let her arms fall limp, and the paper slipped from her fingers, carried up into the air by a gust of wind. I lunged forward and miraculously caught it before it flew away. I glanced at the paper. It wasn't a pregnancy confirmation. The bold text at the top caught my eye. Genetic screening results. I scanned the complex medical terms, my eyes landing on the final conclusion. Results indicate the fetus carries a rare recessive gene with a high risk of developing X-linked genetic syndrome. Amniocentesis is recommended for a definitive diagnosis. Though I didn't fully understand the technicalities, I gathered that the baby Jessica was carrying had a serious health problem. "It just says there's a risk," I said, trying to reassure her. "You still need more tests. Don't give up hope." "Hope?" Jessica looked at me, her bloodshot eyes now filled with resentment. "You don't understand. You don't understand anything. This baby isn't just my child, he's all my hope. He's my trump card. If he's not a healthy baby boy, I'll have nothing left. Your mother-in-law, Carol, she would never accept a grandchild with a defect. And Michael, he'll abandon me too." Her every word revealed a brutal truth. To them, this baby wasn't a precious new life. It was just a tool, a means to an end. The love they showed was a lie. What they wanted was a perfect male heir. The initial sympathy I felt vanished, replaced by contempt. Just then, a phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Jessica's. She didn't bother to answer, but I caught the name on the screen. Carol. It was my mother-in-law. After a few unanswered rings, a new text message notification popped up. On instinct, I picked up the phone. Jessica didn't react. She seemed to have sunk into her own world of despair. I opened the message and read it. The content stunned me more than Jessica's test results. The text was from my mother-in-law, Carol. "Jessica, how did it go? It has to be a healthy boy. I've arranged everything. The lawyer said that as long as we have hospital documentation of Emily's infertility, plus the fact that you're carrying the family heir, Michael will have a huge advantage in court to demand half of her company. Hang in there, dear." Our family's future depends on you. I felt like I had been electrocuted. I read the message again and again, each word drilling into my brain. So that was it. This was their real scheme. Jessica's pregnancy wasn't just to force my hand in a divorce. It was part of a larger, cruelly detailed plan to seize my entire company. They didn't just want Michael to get a share of the marital assets. They wanted to prove I was infertile, paint me as a defective wife, and use that to give Michael leverage in court to claim a piece of my personal assets, something he legally should never have been able to touch. Infertility. For the past few years, Michael and I had been trying for a baby without success. He always comforted me, saying that children were a gift from God and that it didn't matter to him. It was all a lie. He and his family had secretly weaponized my struggle against me. I looked at Jessica, still lost and broken by the railing. Now I understood her despair. She wasn't just afraid of being abandoned. She was terrified of having ruined their grand plan, terrified of the punishment from Carol and Michael. I clenched the phone in my hand, my fury reaching its absolute peak. But with it came a cold, calculated determination. They wanted to play a high-stakes game of chess? Fine, I would play with them. They wanted to use the law against me? I would use the law to turn the tables on them. Jessica, I said, my voice no longer panicked but eerily calm. This is not the time to die. If you die, you lose everything, and no one will be there to protect your child. Only by living do you stand a chance. Jessica turned to look at me, her eyes filled with suspicion. A chance for what? A chance to not be treated like a disposable object once you're no longer useful, I said, articulating each word. They need you. They need that baby in your belly. But if the child isn't what they expect, how do you think they'll treat you? Do you want to spend the rest of your life living under their thumb, treated with contempt? My words seemed to strike at Jessica's deepest fears. She was silent. The crazed look in her eyes subsided, replaced by confusion. I knew this was the decisive moment. I wasn't saving her out of kindness. I was saving her because I needed an ally, a pawn in my own game. A pawn who could help me dismantle their conspiracy from the inside. The wind on the rooftop still howled, but the tension between Jessica and me had dissipated. The madness in her eyes had faded, replaced by a raw, tangible fear and confusion. She was no longer teetering on the edge of the railing but had sunk to the ground, her face buried in her hands, her thin shoulders shaking with sobs. I knew my words had hit their mark, striking at her greatest fear, being discarded. I slowly approached and sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. I didn't reach out to comfort her. At this moment, pity would be an insult. I needed her to see me as a partner, not a savior. Think carefully, Jessica, I said, my voice even and clear. If this baby really does have a problem, what do you think my mother-in-law and Michael will do? They'll force you to terminate the pregnancy. And then, once you're no longer useful, they'll find another woman, another healthier incubator. You'll be left with nothing, branded as a homewrecker. Jessica lifted her head, her swollen eyes meeting mine. Her voice was hoarse. So what am I supposed to do? What can I do? You can make a choice, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Either you continue to be their puppet, living in fear and waiting for the day they throw you away, or you can work with me. Work with you? Jessica let out a bitter, cynical laugh. You're the person I wronged. Why should I trust you? Because we have a common enemy now, I stated firmly. And because I don't want to take your child from you. I just want what is rightfully mine, and to make the people who trampled all over me pay the price. What about you? What do you want? You want a safe future for your child, don't you? My words made Jessica freeze. She stared at me, her gaze probing. What are you planning? First, you have to live, I said. Second, you must keep these test results an absolute secret. You have to lie to them. Lie? How? You will tell them that the results were perfect, that it's a completely healthy baby boy. You will play the part of an ecstatic, confident mother-to-be. The more they believe in this trump card, the more devastating their fall will be when the truth comes out. Jessica fell silent, seeming to weigh my proposal. I knew it was a huge gamble for her. Trust me, her rival, or continue to cling to the empty promises of Michael and Carol. "Why should I do this?" she asked. "What's in it for me?" "Your freedom," I replied. "I promise that after this is all over, I won't press any charges against you. I will provide you with enough money for you and your child to start a new life somewhere else, far away from these people. Your child, regardless of his condition, is an innocent life. He deserves to be loved, not used as a tool." My words, especially the last part, seemed to touch the deepest maternal instincts within her. She looked down at her belly, her hand unconsciously stroking it. Finally, after a long silence, she looked up, her eyes holding a newfound resolve. "Okay, I'll do it. But you have to promise to keep your word." "I promise." I held out my hand. Jessica hesitated for a moment, then placed her cold hand in mine. With that handshake between two rivals, on the rooftop of a maternity hospital, an unlikely alliance was forged. "Now, the first thing you need to do," I said after we had both calmed down, "is call my mother-in-law and give her the good news." Jessica took a deep breath, composed her face into its usual radiant expression, and dialed Carol's number. "Hello, Carol. It's me. Yes, the results are wonderful. The doctor said it's a healthy boy, developing perfectly." She acted flawlessly, her voice clear and joyful. On the other end, I could hear Carol's ecstatic cry. "That's wonderful news, dear. Wonderful. You just focus on that. Leave everything else to me." After hanging up, the smile vanished from Jessica's lips. She looked at me, her expression complex. "What's next?" "Next, we launch a preemptive strike," I said, my voice turning cold. "They want to use lawyers to destroy me. So, we'll use a lawyer to make them panic." Without another moment's hesitation, I pulled out my phone and called someone I knew could help me make the first move in this chess game. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. I drove to a prestigious law firm in the city center. The man I needed to see was Mr. Lawson, a veteran attorney and a close friend of my late father. I had briefly explained my situation to him over the phone, and he had agreed to see me immediately. Sitting in his elegant office, I laid out the entire story from the night I caught them, to the photos, the recording, and the conspiracy to steal my company that I had uncovered in Carol's text message. The more Mr. Lawson heard, the grimmer his expression became. When I finished, he slapped his hand lightly on the desk. The audacity! To think they could disregard the law and my friend's daughter like this. He looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "Emily, don't you worry. Leave this to me. They want to play legal games? I'll show them what the law really is." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "First, we're going to send them a little gift." Mr. Lawson smiled, a hint of steel in his eyes. "A cease and desist letter from my firm, demanding an immediate stop to all acts of harassment, slander, and attempts to seize your assets. At the same time, we'll request a formal meeting between our legal counsels to discuss the division of assets in a divorce. The letter will be delivered personally to both Michael and Carol." I understood his strategy. It was a psychological blow, designed to shock and terrify them, since they still believed I was a naive little lamb. "But they have their own lawyer," I said, worried. "Their lawyer is small time," Mr. Lawson scoffed. "When they see a letter from my office, they'll know how to behave. You just go home and continue your performance. Let Jessica deliver her good news, and then just wait for the show to begin." Just as Mr. Lawson predicted, the legal letter, delivered the next morning, sent a shockwave through my husband's family. That afternoon, as I was in the kitchen, I heard Michael and Carol shouting at each other in the living room. They were panicking, unable to understand why I had acted so suddenly or how I had discovered their plan. They were likely suspecting each other, wondering who had leaked the information. My act was starting to work, but I had no idea their reaction would lead to an even more horrific truth, a dark secret from Michael's past that he had buried for years. I stood, pressed against the kitchen door, holding my breath and listening. The argument in the living room grew louder. The letter from Mr. Lawson's firm had truly hit its mark, igniting panic and mutual suspicion among them. "How could she know?" Carol's voice was shrill with alarm. "Our plan, only the three of us knew. Michael, did you slip up? Did you say something?" "How could I have said anything?" Michael shot back, his tone defensive and frustrated. "I haven't even seen her since yesterday. Maybe it was Jessica. What if she's playing both sides? Impossible, Carol dismissed immediately. She's completely dependent on us, on the air she's carrying. Why would she betray us? I smirked to myself. Carol was so confident in her ability to control people, never realizing that her overconfidence was her greatest weakness. Their argument raged on, a blame game to find the mole. They never once suspected that I, the wife who loved her husband blindly, could be behind it all. They just assumed someone had tipped me off. This only made me more confident in continuing my charade. When Michael stormed into the kitchen for a glass of water, his face was a thundercloud. He stopped short when he saw me, his eyes narrowing. "Did you hear something?" I looked up, my eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "Hear what?" "I just heard you and Carol talking a little loudly. Is everything okay?" I performed my part flawlessly. Michael stared at me for a few seconds, searching my face for any sign of deception. But then he sighed and shook his head. "It's nothing, just some minor family stuff." He didn't dare tell the truth. Admitting it would be admitting his own conspiracy. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Carol and Michael dropped the pretense of a happy family. They engaged in hushed conversations and exchanged meaningful, nervous glances. They were desperately trying to figure out how much I knew and who was backing me. Meanwhile, Jessica's performance was even more brilliant than mine. She acted overjoyed about her healthy pregnancy, constantly talking about a bright future and giving the family a beautiful grandson. She would even make pointedly sweet remarks in front of me, like, "I hope my son will be as smart and successful as his Aunt Emily." Each word was a hidden dagger, meant to both please Carol and test my reaction. I ignored it all. I remained the oblivious wife. I went to work during the day and came home to cook elaborate meals at night. My placid demeanor seemed to be driving them crazy. They couldn't understand how I could be so calm after sending a lawyer's letter. They didn't know I was just waiting for the biggest fish to take the bait. And then, the opportunity arrived. Following the plan my mother and I had devised, I began to set the trap. I intentionally left a binder on my home office desk labeled Florida Resort Property Investment, Phase 1. Inside were professionally presented market analyses and enticing profit projections. Of course, it was all fake, a project created by my mother and her associates. I knew Michael, desperate for money to fund his schemes, couldn't possibly resist such a lucrative opportunity. Sure enough, that night, as I feigned sleep, I sensed Michael tiptoeing into my office. I heard the rustle of papers. He had taken the bait. The next morning at breakfast, Michael was in exceptionally high spirits, a stark contrast to his recent foul mood. He served me food and asked detailed questions about my work. Then, he asked casually, "Any new projects at your company lately? I hear the market for resort properties is booming." I feigned surprise. "How did you know?" "Oh, just something I heard from friends," he said, quickly covering his tracks. I smiled, launching into my act. "Actually, yes. There's a fantastic project in Florida. The potential return is as high as 50% in just 6 months. But," I trailed off, pretending to be hesitant. "But what?" Michael pressed, his eyes lighting up. "But the initial investment is quite large, around $500,000. I'm not sure if I should go for it." "Are you crazy? An opportunity like that and you're hesitating?" Michael exclaimed, feigning disappointment. "You could make $250,000 in profit in 6 months. You really don't have a head for business, do you?" I lowered my head, pretending to be hurt. "But where would I get $500,000 right now? I can't just pull that kind of cash out of the company." Michael was silent for a moment, pretending to think. Then, as if struck by a brilliant idea, he said, "How about this? I have some friends in banking. I could take out a loan for you. After all, I'm your husband. Helping you is helping our family." I knew the trap was about to spring. He wanted to use a bank loan in his name to invest in my project. That way, if it succeeded, he would have grounds to claim a share of the profits. A perfect plan. "But wouldn't that be too much trouble for you?" I asked, feigning concern. "Trouble? What are you talking about? We're husband and wife," he said with a smile I knew was dripping with greed. Over the next few days, Michael relentlessly pushed me about the Florida project. He even drafted a joint investment contract between us, stating that he would secure the capital while I would manage the project. I acted as if I were completely won over. The day to sign the loan documents at the bank arrived. I sat beside Michael, watching him confidently sign his name on the debt papers, a quiet, vengeful satisfaction growing inside me. He had no idea he had just signed his own conviction, a conviction that went far beyond money. Just as we left the bank, Mr. Lawson's phone rang. He answered, and his expression suddenly turned grave. "What? Is that confirmed?" He turned to me, his voice urgent. "Emily, there's something else. My investigators, while digging deeper into Michael's past, have uncovered something shocking. His brother, David, the one who died 5 years ago, his death might not have been an accident." Mr. Lawson's words were a thunderclap, making my head explode. All the sounds around me faded away, leaving only his voice echoing in my ears. His death might not have been an accident. I froze, a chilling sensation creeping up my spine. An accident. For 5 years, the entire family and everyone else believed that David, Michael's older brother, had died in a tragic car crash. But now, Mr. Lawson was saying it might not have been an accident at all. Then what was it? "Mr. Lawson, what are you saying?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. What does that mean?" Mr. Lawson looked at me, his expression deadly serious. He signaled for the driver to pull over on a quiet street, then turned back to me. "Emily, you need to stay calm and listen." While investigating Michael's background, my people re-examined the file on his brother's accident. There are several very suspicious details. "Suspicious?" "Yes," Mr. Lawson said, his voice low. "According to the report, David was driving on the highway when he suddenly lost control, hit the median, and was killed instantly. The police ruled the cause as falling asleep at the wheel. But my investigator found a witness from that day, a truck driver, who was right behind David's car. The man was afraid to come forward back then, but he's talking now. He said that just before the car swerved, he saw a struggle inside the vehicle." "A struggle?" My heart clenched. "Yes. And more importantly, the person sitting in the passenger seat next to David at that time was Michael." Mr. Lawson said his name, and I felt my world collapse all over again. Michael. He was in the car, but I remembered, after the crash, Michael had only minor scratches. He told everyone he had been asleep in the back and had no idea what happened until he woke up in the hospital. He had lied. "Not only that," Mr. Lawson continued, his voice hardening. "My people also discovered that just 1 week after his brother's death, all of David's shares in their small family business were transferred to Michael's name, based on a pre-existing will. And the sole beneficiary of that will was not his wife Jessica, it was Michael." All the disparate pieces suddenly clicked into place, forming a horrific picture. A suspicious accident, a false testimony, a strange will, and Jessica, the grieving widow, who then became the mistress of her own brother-in-law. A wave of absolute revulsion rose in my throat. Could it be? I didn't dare speak my thoughts aloud. Mr. Lawson sighed. "Right now, it's all just suspicion. We don't have concrete proof to convict him, but it shows the level of cruelty and cunning in Michael and his family. It's far worse than we ever imagined. They will do anything for money, even sacrifice their own flesh and blood." I sat in stunned silence, a deathly chill spreading through me. I thought I had seen their true faces, but this was 1,000 times more monstrous. The man I had lived with for 7 years, the man I had once loved, could be a murderer, a man who killed his own brother for money. And Jessica? Did she know? When did their affair begin? Before or after David's death? Was she also an accomplice in this terrible scheme? A new flood of questions arose, each one a knife twisting in my heart. I felt like I was sinking in quicksand, a conspiracy within a conspiracy, where every struggle only pulled me deeper. "Emily, are you okay?" Mr. Lawson asked, concerned. I shook my head, trying to regain my composure. "I'm fine. Mr. Lawson, what do we do now?" "For now, we stick to the plan," he said. "Let the $500,000 trap spring. That will be the biggest blow to their finances. As for this other matter, we must investigate with extreme caution. I'll have my team continue to search for more evidence. But you, Emily, you must be incredibly careful. You are living with a monster. You cannot let your guard down for a single second." I nodded, my heart heavy. The satisfaction I felt from tricking Michael into signing the loan papers was gone, replaced by a genuine, terrifying fear. I was sharing a house with a potential murderer. I had to get out. But not yet. I had to stay. I had to find the truth not just for myself, but for his dead brother, too. That evening, I returned home to find Michael in his office, engrossed in the fake project file I had provided. He looked up at me, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Look at this, honey. I've spoken with the bank manager. All the paperwork is done. As soon as you sign the authorization form, the money will be released tomorrow." I looked at him, at that smile, at those eyes glittering with greed, and I forced a smile of my own. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm counting on you." But inside, a different question screamed in my mind. That hand, the one holding the pen and pointing to the contract, was it the same hand that had caused his brother's death? That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the crash, of the struggle in the car, haunted me. I suddenly remembered something. In Michael's office, there was a small safe he always guarded fiercely. He said it was where he kept important mementos. Could it hold a secret related to David's death? The thought of the secret safe in Michael's office tormented me all night. It was like Pandora's box, holding secrets I was both terrified of and desperate to uncover. Was there a clue about David's death inside? Or was I just overthinking things? I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find a way to open it. But how? Michael guarded it like a hawk, and I had no idea what the combination was. My chance came unexpectedly the following afternoon. It was my mother-in-law's birthday. Despite my burning hatred and disgust, I still had to play the part of the devoted daughter-in-law. I had booked a small party at a fancy restaurant, inviting all their close relatives and friends. This wasn't just an obligation, it was part of my plan. I needed a stage, a public forum, for my final takedown. And Carol's birthday party, ironically, was the perfect venue. That afternoon, the entire family was busy getting ready. Michael was preening in his best suit. Jessica was made up beautifully, her maternity dress unable to hide her triumphant expression. Carol was dripping with jewelry, bragging to the neighbors about her golden daughter-in-law me. Watching their charade was almost laughable. "Are you ready yet?" "Everyone's waiting downstairs," I said, stepping into the office to hurry Michael along. He was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. "Almost." "You go on ahead," he said, his eyes still fixed on his handsome reflection. Just then, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and quickly stepped out onto the balcony to take the call. It was probably Jessica. This was my moment. I glanced at the small safe under his desk. My heart hammered. I only had a few minutes. I quickly sat down, pretending to look for something in a drawer while my eyes were locked on the safe's combination dial. I had to try, but what combination? His birthday? Our anniversary? Jessica's birthday? No, those were too obvious for someone as cautious as Michael. Suddenly, I thought of David, his brother. I remembered Michael once saying how much he idolized his older brother, how David was his biggest influence. Could it be? My hands trembled as I entered David's date of birth. Beep, beep, beep. The error sound chimed. It wasn't it. My heart sank. What else could I try? I scanned the office, searching for a clue. My eyes landed on the only photograph on his desk, a picture of David and Michael as children, their arms around each other, beaming. At the bottom of the wooden frame was a small engraved plaque, Anniversary of the Founding of D&M Enterprises. I remembered. That was the name of the small family company the two brothers had started together right out of college, the company whose shares now belonged entirely to Michael. An idea flashed. I tried entering the date the company was founded. Click. A soft sound. The safe door popped open. I froze, a mix of elation and terror washing over me. I had opened it. I glanced at the balcony. Michael was still deep in conversation. I didn't have much time. Trembling, I pulled the safe door open. Inside wasn't cash or jewels, just a few file folders and a small wooden box. I grabbed the folders first. My heart stopped. They were life insurance policies. 2 of them. One for David and one for me. Both were for massive amounts. And the most horrifying detail, the sole beneficiary listed on both policies was Michael Davis. So that was it. He hadn't just taken the company shares, he had received a huge insurance payout from his brother's death. And me, if anything were to happen to me, he would get everything. He had planned it all. A perfect scheme to get rich off the lives of those closest to him. My blood ran cold. Nausea rose in my throat. I fought to stay calm as my shaking hands opened the small wooden box. Inside was an old, cheap-looking phone. I pressed the power button. It still had some battery. I went to the text messages, and what I read confirmed my worst fears. They were messages between Michael and someone saved as partner, sent in the days leading up to the crash. Is everything ready? The brakes have been handled, just a light jerk at the right time, and it will look like a real accident. Good. I need to be sure the money will be transferred as soon as the job is done. Of course, as soon as I get the insurance payout, you'll get your cut. Just make sure it's clean. I collapsed onto the floor, the phone slipping from my grasp. My whole body shook uncontrollably. It was true. It wasn't an accident. It was a meticulously planned, monstrous murder. And the mastermind was none other than my husband, the younger brother David had loved so dearly. He had killed his own brother for money. A monster. He was a monster in human skin. "What are you doing in there?" "We're going to be late," Michael's voice called from the doorway. I jumped, scrambling to put everything back in the safe and lock it. I took deep breaths, wiping away the tears that threatened to fall. I couldn't let him find out. Not now. I stood up, opened the door, and forced a smile, just looking for my lipstick. Let's go. Tonight's birthday party, I thought grimly, wouldn't just be an exposé of adultery and fraud. It would be a trial to condemn a murderer, and I would be the one to deliver the verdict. The fine dining restaurant was spectacularly decorated. Crystal chandeliers glittered, soft music played, and the air buzzed with laughter and conversation. People raised their glasses to toast Carol, my mother-in-law, on her birthday. She sat at the head of the table, beaming, wearing a jade bracelet I knew Michael had bought with my money. Michael sat beside her, holding hands with Jessica, proudly introducing her to everyone as his beloved sister-in-law. They performed the part of a happy, harmonious family perfectly. I sat at a corner of the table, watching silently. I was like an audience member at a tragicomedy, a play where I knew every line, every move, and the disastrous ending that was about to unfold. The feeling in my heart was no longer the pain of a betrayed wife. It was a profound, seething contempt for the people smiling and laughing in front of me. One a murderer, one an adulteress, one an accomplice who covered up her own son's crimes. They were a family of sinners. "Emily, why are you sitting over there all by yourself? Come take a picture with me," Carol called out sweetly, beckoning me over. I smiled, stood up, and walked toward them. I stood next to Michael, the scent of Jessica's cheap perfume making me feel sick. "Smile, honey." "It's a happy day," Michael whispered in my ear, his hand casually resting on my waist. I flinched, fighting back my revulsion as I forced a bright smile for the camera. This would likely be the last photo we ever took together. The party continued in high spirits. After Carol's thank you speech, the MC invited everyone to turn their attention to a large screen. "And now," he announced, "a surprise gift that the devoted daughter-in-law, Mrs. Emily Davis, has specially prepared for her mother-in-law." All eyes in the room turned to me. Michael, Jessica, and Carol looked at me with surprise, probably expecting a heartwarming slideshow of family photos. Michael even leaned in and whispered, "You're so thoughtful." I just smiled without replying. This was my cue. I stood up, walked onto the stage, and took the microphone from the bewildered MC. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice echoing through the silent room, calm and clear. "Before we watch my gift, I'd like to say a few words. Today is a very special day. It's the birthday of my mother-in-law, a woman I have always respected. And on this occasion, I'd also like to share a story with everyone. A story about my family. A story of love, sacrifice, and secrets." The entire room was silent, watching me with curiosity. Michael and Carol began to look uneasy, their faces changing color as they started to rise from their seats to stop me. The story begins 7 years ago. When I married my husband, Michael Davis, I said, my eyes locked on his. I thought I was the happiest woman in the world. I was wrong. With that, I signaled to the technician I had hired. The house lights dimmed, and the large screen flickered to life. The first video began to play, the one I had recorded on that fateful night. The scene of Michael and Jessica tangled on our bed appeared in high definition. The sounds of their moans, their heavy breathing, and Michael's words, "You're addictive, Jessica," filled the silent space. The room erupted. Gasps and shocked whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone turned to stare at Michael and Jessica with disbelief. Michael's face went from white to purple. Jessica buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Carol was frozen in her chair, her mouth hanging open. "Turn it off! Turn that garbage off right now!" Michael roared, lunging for the stage to grab the microphone. But it was too late. I calmly signaled the technician again. The next set of images appeared on the screen, the photos from Jessica's phone. Pictures of them in Paris, photos of her pregnant, and the photo of their 2-year-old son, Jacob, with the caption, "Jacob, son of Mom and Dad." "This is your true grandson, Carol," I said into the microphone, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "The son, your son, and my sister-in-law have been secretly raising for 2 years, while I, his legal wife, was foolishly believing in his love." The chaos in the room reached its peak. Guests were on their feet, pointing and murmuring. The birthday party had turned into a public trial. "But that's not all," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "The main gift is yet to come." I gave another signal. This time, the screen showed the text messages from the old phone in Michael's safe. The messages discussing the tampered brakes, the insurance money, the light jerk at the right time. 5 years ago, my husband's brother, David Davis, died in a car accident, I said, emphasizing the last 2 words. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the real cause of that accident. My husband, Michael Davis, conspired with an accomplice to murder his own brother, to steal his assets and collect the insurance money. If the previous evidence had stunned the room, this revelation horrified them. No one could believe their eyes. A deathly, chilling silence fell over the room. All eyes were now fixed on Michael, no longer with curiosity, but with utter disgust and revulsion. He stood paralyzed on the stage, his body trembling, sweat pouring down his face. He stammered, trying to say something, but no words came out. He was cornered, with absolutely no escape. Suddenly, from the back of the room, 2 men in plain clothes walked swiftly toward the stage. One of them held up a badge. "Michael Davis, we're from the homicide division. You are under arrest on suspicion of murder." The moment the 2 detectives appeared and read the arrest warrant, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The prior chaos died down into an eerie, absolute silence. Michael stood frozen on the stage, his eyes staring blankly into space. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a dry, final sound, like the gavel of fate officially closing the book on his life of crime. He didn't resist. He didn't scream. It was as if all his strength and cunning had been drained from him. He simply stumbled after the detectives like a puppet whose strings had been cut. As Michael was led past the head table, Carol finally snapped out of her nightmarish trance. She let out a piercing, mournful shriek. "Michael, my son!" She scrambled to her feet, trying to run after him, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, wailing hysterically. The pain of losing her son, the public humiliation, the utter disgrace, it all came crashing down on the woman who had spent her life scheming and preening. Jessica, the guilty sister-in-law, fared no better. She was slumped in her chair, her face as white as a sheet, her vacant eyes following Michael's retreating figure. Their 2-year-old son, Jacob, likely sensing the turmoil, began to cry loudly. His innocent wails echoed through the scene of devastation, a heartbreaking testament to the sins of his parents. The birthday party had devolved into a tragedy. The guests, the relatives, and friends, after their initial shock, began to quietly get up and leave. They said nothing, simply filed out, their faces a mixture of pity and contempt for the family that had just imploded before their eyes. They had come to celebrate but had instead witnessed the most horrific unmasking of evil they had ever seen. I stood on the stage, Looking down at it all, I felt no satisfaction, no lingering hatred. All that remained was a profound emptiness and exhaustion. My war was over. I had won. But it was a victory soaked in tears and bitterness. I put the microphone down and walked calmly off the stage, past my mother-in-law weeping on the floor, past my sister-in-law clutching her child in despair. They were no longer my enemies. Now they were just pathetic figures, victims of their own greed and cruelty. My mother was waiting for me at the exit. She said nothing, just draped a coat over my shoulders and guided me to the car. As the car pulled away, leaving the lavish restaurant and the wreckage of the Davis family behind, I glanced back. Through the window, I could see Carol, still crumpled on the floor, a lonely, miserable silhouette. I knew that from this moment on, their lives would be an endless cycle of torment, regret, and retribution. A few months later, Michael's trial began. With the irrefutable evidence, the testimony of his arrested accomplice, the text messages, the insurance policies, the court found him guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the crimes of first-degree murder and fraud. Jessica, for her role as an accessory and for concealing a felony, also received a significant prison sentence. Carol, after the immense shock, suffered a complete mental breakdown. She now lived in a state of confusion, constantly muttering the names of her two sons. The Davis family, once a pillar of their community, was utterly destroyed. As for me, after the storm, I found peace far away from it all. I sold my company, and the house filled with painful memories. I used a portion of the money to establish a charitable foundation in David's name, dedicated to helping victims of wrongful legal prosecution and providing legal aid to vulnerable women. I wanted to turn my pain into strength, to help others so that no one would have to endure the tragedy I had. With the remaining money, I bought a small house by the sea, a place with golden sun, white sand, and the soothing sound of the waves. I lived a simple, quiet life, spending my days reading, gardening, and walking along the beach every evening. I never remarried. The scar in my heart would probably never fully heal, but I learned to live with it. I learned to forgive not them, but myself, so that I could finally find tranquility. One evening, as I was sitting on the sand watching the sunset paint the sky, a little boy, about 2 or 3 years old, chubby and cheerful, ran toward me. He tripped and fell, and I quickly helped him up. "Are you okay, little guy?" I asked, brushing the sand off his clothes. "I'm okay," he said, looking up at me with big, round, dark eyes. For a moment, I froze. Those eyes, that smile, they looked so much like Jacob's. "Thank you," a familiar voice said. I looked up. The woman standing before me was Jessica. She looked completely different, stripped of her former glamour and pride. She wore simple clothes, and her face was weathered, but her eyes were clearer, more serene. After being released from prison on probation, she had moved here with her son, living in a small fishing village nearby. We sat together on the sand, not speaking, just quietly watching her son play in the surf. There was no hatred between us, no resentment. All that remained was the shared silence of two people who had survived the same great storm. I'm sorry," Jessica finally whispered, her voice hoarse. I didn't reply, just gave a slight shake of my head. An apology meant nothing now. All the debts had been washed away by the tide. I looked out at the horizon, where the fiery sun was slowly sinking below the water. Another day was ending, and a new one was about to begin. I knew my life was the same. The painful past was finally closed. Ahead of me was a new dawn, a new life of freedom and peace. And I, Emily, the woman who was once crushed to the lowest depths, had finally found my own rebirth from the ashes of betrayal.